Imagine the sun slowly dipping toward the horizon, the sky painted in soft shades of gold and blue. 5 Navy planes cut through the air, their crews quietly focused on a simple training mission. 14 young aviators were aboard those 5 TBM Avengers. Within hours, every one of them would vanish. No confirmed wreckage tied to those aircraft has ever been recovered. What happened in those final moments as daylight slipped away? Compasses failed, and voices on the radio grew uncertain. Tonight, we focus on the people and the navigation. A quiet look, not a sensational one, as their journey begins on a seemingly perfect day. It was the kind of afternoon that seemed made for flying. The air was clear, the wind light, and the horizon stretched in every direction without a blemish. On the tarmac, sunlight caught the smooth lines of 5 TBM Avenger aircraft as their crews moved with quiet purpose, checking instruments and speaking in short, precise exchanges. They left at 14:10 after a brief delay, climbing into the sky from the Naval Air Station with what felt like nothing more than a routine assignment ahead. The day's mission was simple: follow a triangular course over open water. From base, the formation would head east to reach a set of practice bombing targets near scattered islands. From there, the plan called for a turn north, then back toward the station, completing the loop in under 3 hours. On the charts, it was all clean lines and set bearings. The weather offered wide visibility, and the sea below looked as steady as glass. Yet even a plan that looks perfect on paper carries its own quiet variables. The planes were found to be missing cockpit clocks, so the crews relied on personal wristwatches and dead reckoning, calculating their position using speed, heading, and elapsed time. Over the featureless ocean, where there was nothing to measure against but the compass and the passing minutes, a small error could slowly grow, erasing precision mile by mile. Above the water, the steady pulse of the engines gave reassurance, each rotation a familiar rhythm in the vast quiet. Inside the lead aircraft sat Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, with about 2,500 hours of flight time, experience as a wartime torpedo bomber pilot, and service as an instructor. To the younger men in formation, many barely into their 20s, his presence meant skill and certainty. They had cause to place their trust in him. The Avengers themselves carried the weight of their history. Designed for the battles of the Second World War, they had flown in harsher skies than these. Now they were serving a new role, bringing the hard-earned lessons of war into peacetime training. But routine can sometimes mask vulnerability. A minute's drift in heading, a slightly misread bearing, or a shift in the wind. Each small detail could begin to move them away from those clean lines on the map. As the flight moved east, the view from above changed little. Sea and sky merged at a flat horizon, and even the sun seemed steady in its place. In the cockpits, instruments and routine checks gave a sense of order. From far off, the 5 planes would have appeared as small, dark shapes holding formation, shadows sliding faintly over the calm water below. The formation edged farther from land, engines carrying them toward their first target. Every man aboard followed the path laid out in the briefing. Nothing ahead suggested that anything would be different from the countless flights before. Yet over the empty sea, precision depended on invisible mathematics, time, speed, heading, and on the leader whose words set every turn. Unseen, each passing minute brought them closer to a point where navigation would feel less certain, and where the familiar markers of the day would give way to something harder to name. Somewhere out there, the clarity of the mission would begin to fade, replaced by the first small questions about exactly where they were. It was some time after the bombing run when the first signs of uncertainty passed quietly between the cockpits. The early exchanges over the radio were calm, almost routine. Remarks about heading and position, the kind of checks made without concern. Then, Lieutenant Taylor's voice came through with something different. He reported that both of his compasses were out and added that he believed the flight was over the Florida Keys. In a mission where navigation was the thread tying every decision together, this was the kind of break that could unravel the pattern. Though here, all around them, there was nothing but water. The formation stayed tight as Taylor adjusted their course. His belief placed them on the far side of Florida, with open Gulf waters ahead. Later investigation concluded this was a misidentification, and that the islands he saw were probably part of the Bahamas, east of Florida, Grand Bahama, or Abaco. That error, however small it seemed in the moment, would shape every mile they flew next. The background record suggests the students deferred to their leader, following naval discipline rather than risk-breaking formation or challenging his judgment. In that environment, unity was both a strength and a limitation. Above, the light was shifting toward the softer tones of late day. Sea and sky merged into a silver-blue plain, broken only by the occasional haze along the horizon. The steady drumming of the engines filled the spaces between brief bursts of radio traffic. Questions about their position, replies from Taylor suggesting they may have turned the wrong way earlier, and new directions to alter course again. The younger pilots held to their stations, trusting that keeping together was their best chance of finding land. Navigation in theory is precise. Heading, speed, elapsed time. Out here, every number depended on instruments functioning as they should, and on the navigator's mind staying clear under pressure. Without landmarks, even a tiny error in heading could grow unseen, widening into miles. The ocean, unmarked and patient, gave no clues that anything was wrong. As the afternoon wore on, weather began to erode the certainty further. Haze thickened in places, blurring the meeting point of sky and sea. Shapes on the horizon, perhaps islands, perhaps clouds, came and went. Shadows grew longer in the cockpits as daylight drained away. On shore, radio operators urged Taylor to switch to the emergency search and rescue frequency, but he refused. "I cannot switch frequencies. I must keep my planes intact," he said, according to the record. That choice, meant to hold the formation together, left search crews straining to follow their movements. The fading light worked its way into every decision now. Compass needles that would not settle, haze that shifted familiar outlines, the voices of shore stations offering corrections from hundreds of miles away, all folded into the increasingly complex picture in Taylor's mind. Each change in direction felt like it could be the one to set them right, yet each also carried them further toward uncertainty. The sky above, which had begun as a clear map, now felt like an enclosed space. As darkness moved in, the quiet threads of their radio exchanges still reached the ground, carrying a picture of a squadron searching for bearings and holding together in the growing night. Somewhere far below that calm surface of static and voices, another set of preparations had begun, people readying themselves to go out and look. Back on the ground, radio traffic painted its own picture. Controllers tracked the fading daylight and knew the squadron was still somewhere out over the water, moving steadily into night. Orders were given with quiet precision, and a rescue aircraft was made ready. The choice was a PBM-5 Mariner, a large patrol bomber built for long patrols over open ocean. 13 crew members climbed aboard, moving quickly but without haste. At 1927, the Mariner lifted off from NAS Banana River, making its last routine radio call at about 1930. You might imagine the evening air cooling around the runway as the big aircraft rolled forward, its wings heavy with fuel. Mariners were known for their long range, able to fly for extended hours while sweeping the sea with watchful eyes. But this capacity came with a hidden risk. Their flexible fuel lines, combined with the large amounts of gasoline they carried, meant that even a small leak could create dangerous vapors. In turbulent air, a single spark might be enough to end a flight before anyone could react. The mission's route aimed toward the last reported position of Flight 19. The Mariner's crew would be scanning for flares, a patch of oil on the water, or perhaps the dim outline of a raft. The sea that night was modestly calm, and it was not impossible that the missing planes had managed a controlled ditching. If so, there was still a chance to find survivors. A little after 21:15, observers aboard the tanker SS Gaines Mills saw a sudden flare of light in the sky, followed by fire on the ocean's surface. They later reported the position as approximately 28 degrees 35 minutes north, 80 degrees 15 minutes west. The flames lingered on the water, and an oil slick began to spread. There was no radio distress call and no sign of life, only a brief and silent transformation of night into fire. Quietly, the rescue effort grew. What had been a search for 5 now included another crew. Investigators later noted that the PBM Mariner's design made the possibility of a mid-air explosion credible. Its generous fuel supply was vital for long missions. Yet, if vapors escaped into enclosed spaces, there was no margin for error. On a low search pass, with the engines working hard over dark waves, an accident could happen quickly and leave almost nothing to recover. For those directing the operation, the search expanded beyond what anyone could have planned for. 14 airmen from Flight 19 had already been missing for hours. Now, 13 more were gone. The sea gave back only what it chose: patches of oil, drifting traces the current would soon scatter. In the ready rooms and operations centers, men studied maps with blank spaces where reports should have been. Some of those who had watched the Mariner take off knew its crew personally. Others had flown beside Taylor or trained the younger pilots of Flight 19. The work of search and rescue was part of their duty, yet it asked them to step willingly into the same uncertainty that had taken their friends. That night closed with 2 losses bound together, each one casting its own shadow. What began as a single disappearance had become a more complicated and sorrowful puzzle. In the days that followed, the effort to understand these events would turn to the records, the testimony, and the fragments from a wide stretch of ocean, seeking some pattern, however small, that might explain what happened out there. Even without a single confirmed fragment from the sea, the Navy opened its investigation almost immediately. Officers gathered logs, transcripts of radio calls, and any times and positions they could verify. Statements were taken from everyone who had monitored the transmissions. From this, the first conclusions began to form. The Navy's initial Board of Investigation stated that Lieutenant Taylor had likely mistaken low islands in the Bahamas for the Florida Keys. Believing he was west of Florida, he turned his formation northeast, an action that would have made sense if that belief were correct, yet in reality carried them further into the Atlantic. If Taylor truly thought they were over the Gulf of Mexico, heading northeast seemed the logical path toward crossing Florida to their base. In fact, geography placed them still well east of the coast. According to navigational triangulation based on radio signals, investigators later estimated Flight 19's position at about 1750 to be within a 50 to 100 nautical mile radius of 29 degrees north, 79 degrees west, and heading roughly 270 degrees. It was a location far from where Taylor believed himself to be, a scale of error that meant each course change was working against their return. Radio controllers urged Taylor to alter heading toward the west-southwest, but he resisted changing channels to the emergency frequency, concerned it might scatter the group. In training, cohesion mattered. That choice kept them together, but also kept their communications on a single circuit as darkness and confusion deepened. Investigators identified a single turning point, Taylor's sighting of land, which he identified as the Keys. More likely, they reasoned, these were Bahamian islands such as Grand Bahama or Abaco. In the fading light and without operational compasses, that assumption fixed itself into his mental map. Once a leader's mental map is set, every sighting and heading is interpreted to support it. A simple piece of guidance for lost pilots in the region was to fly a heading of 270 degrees due west toward the Florida coastline. But this assumed an accurate sense of where you were. If you already thought you were west of your destination, turning west again could take you deeper into open ocean. That day, choices that were reasonable in principle may have been working in the opposite direction to safety. The weather played its part too. Steady winds over the area could have drifted the Avengers off their intended track over the hours, and variable visibility limited their ability to cross-check position by sight. Between the wind and the absence of landmarks, small navigation errors may have grown unnoticed. By the last transmissions, fuel was believed to be running low. Most investigators think the Avengers ran out of fuel and likely ditched in the Atlantic. The TBM Avenger could stay afloat briefly, but its ditching characteristics far offshore, combined with the distance from land, meant little chance of survival. In moderate to heavy seas, the aircraft would flood quickly and sink, leaving scarce time for crews to escape with rafts or to remain visible for search. No confirmed wreckage of the 5 Avengers has ever been verified. When Taylor's family contested the navigation error conclusion, the Navy amended the record to list the cause as unknown. Officially, the case remained unresolved, but privately, many investigators accepted the intersection of human judgment under pressure, mechanical failure, and environment as the most practical explanation. It is a scenario shaped by skill, trust, and the limits of certainty. An experienced leader acting on a position he believed to be true, and a loyal formation holding course beside him. What remains is a picture without confirmation, laid against the sheer reach of the Atlantic, where even the strongest evidence can be carried beyond sight. And in that space, certainty becomes as distant as the horizon itself. Even with modern tools, some events resist complete understanding. The ocean keeps its distance, wide enough to hold entire chapters of history beyond reach. Aircraft and ships can search for days, yet return without a single answer they can be certain of. It sometimes reveals small traces while holding back the larger story. Those gaps leave room for quiet reflection and the human details that matter most. In all, 14 men from Flight 19 and 13 from the PBM were lost.